assume everyone knows where you live.
Yep.
Assume everybody knows where you went to school, because it's not that difficult to find out. They just go onto Facebook, and most people have useful information like that publicly available for anybody to see. So assume the bad guys know almost as much about you as you do, and work backwards from that.
It's all about your threat model, right? Because like a little old lady it might be better that they write their passwords in a physical book, because how easy is it for a hacker to like go to their house, break in, versus just do it like over the internet, right?
Yeah.
So you just got to decide your threat model. Is that right?
That pretty much. I mean, everybody has to decide what works best for them. Everybody's got to decide what the potential threats are.
I just think it's important that we highlight like people like us in this sort of world, cybersecurity. We know what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing, but the average person doesn't, right? Everyone, David Bombal back with a very special guest. Rob, great to have you back on the show.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
So, Rob, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions because I have heard various things about MFA and 2FA. So let's start with the basics, and then I want to ask you about, is it the solution to all my problems? So let's start with this. What is 2FA? What is MFA? What's the difference? Are they the same thing?
For all intents and purposes, it's the same thing. It's something you know, which is typically your password, and something you have, which is typically an app or a message or something, which is an additional layer, something else to verify that you are who you pertain to be. It is undoubtedly a good thing. It is better than some 2FA, some MFA is better than no 2FA or MFA. So it's undoubtedly a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is it important to use MFA
Absolutely.
in today's world?
Absolutely. It's crazy not to. If it's available, you got to use it.
Why?
Because if not, and someone gets their hands on your password, it is as simple as logging into whatever it is that isn't 2FA or MFA. It is trivial. One of the biggest problems that a lot of people have is reuse of passwords.
Yeah.
So somebody uses the same password on 15 different websites.
Yep.
One of them gets compromised, and effectively they're all compromised. Maybe one of them's your bank, one of them's a trading platform, whatever the case may be. So that's why 2FA is so important. You're effectively limiting the potential damage if somebody does get their hands on your password, and it happens quite often. Passwords leak all the time. Yeah. I sign up for, have I been pwned?
Pwned, yeah.
And it's awesome. I get an email every 3 or 4 weeks going, your password's appeared here, your password has appeared there. Thankfully, they're not actual passwords I use, but it is useful to know, and they are out there. But the point is, if you have some sort of two-factor authentication on an account, it makes it that much harder for the bad guys to actually get in and access your information, your data, your money, potentially in some cases.
Rob, YouTube is not the real world. I get a lot of interesting comments on YouTube, and I really appreciate everyone who comments, but you're in the real world, so I want to get like real world versus YouTube. Is it true, like what you've said there, that people do reuse passwords in 2026?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know personal experience. Family members, they're always either the same or very much variations on
like
a theme.
Password 1, password 2, password 3.
Or password 26 or whatever the case may be. Yeah, no, I mean, look, not that many people use password managers. It is good that now you don't really even have to go out and buy a password manager. So something like iCloud Passwords, for example, makes the entire process easier. It'll fill passwords in when you go to things on your website. It'll actually do the multi-factor authentication for you as well, so you don't need a separate app. So it's a lot easier than it was previously. But even with that tool available, even with that, nice user experience, very often people will still go dog's name 26 or other kid's name 26. And that's just, it's way too easy, because if somebody knows a little bit of information about you, leave aside, password stealers and info stealers and all the other things, malicious Chrome extensions and all that kind of stuff. Leave all of that aside. If I know a little bit of information about you and your password hygiene isn't what it might be, it's not that difficult. I mean, you literally put in, both kids' names, dog name, where you grew up, where you went to school. You'd probably guess 40-50% of people's passwords without too much effort. And again, the likes of AI tools are obviously making it that much easier, that much quicker for attackers to target people.
I'm glad you mentioned the Chrome extensions. I mean, that's been in the news a lot recently, all these dodgy extensions, and millions of people have had their data scraped.
Yeah, absolutely. The point is, they can see where you're going on the internet. They can very often access your passwords. So if you store your passwords in your browser, you've got a problem once you've got a malicious Chrome extension. It's one of the things that ThreatLocker does, is we treat Chrome extensions as executables, and we block them by default. Because the reality is you don't want, if you're a business, you don't want your staff downloading and running Cooper, the coupon clipper from China.
Yeah.
Nor do you want them to be able to download and run a, malicious or potentially malicious extension. So it's a huge problem. And again, they can see so much up to and including your passwords. I mean, it's one of the things we actually implemented internally using our own tool, is we stopped people from saving passwords in browsers. Because, we stop people from downloading Chrome extensions or running Chrome extensions or Edge extensions as well, but we also stop them from saving their passwords at all in the browsers because it's just so dangerous.
I just think it's important that we highlight, like, people like us in this sort of world, cybersecurity, we know what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing, but the average person doesn't, right? And we have human nature that's lazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, my strategy, my behavior has evolved over time.
Yeah.
So there was a time, say 5, 6, 7 years ago when this wasn't that much of a problem, where I might have had 3 or 4 passwords. I might have used one for something, say an email account or something, and that's something really long, really complicated, and I'm thinking, okay, that's fine. And then other accounts, I might have throwaway passwords, things I don't really care about. But the fact is, so many of these things link back to things like bank accounts and credit cards and so on. You don't even want to get somebody to get into what might be perceived as a low value account of yours. And again, the fact is, if you reuse them, then you're a sitting duck. So again, over time, I've made a conscious effort to everything that I have an account for is a really long, really complicated, really difficult password that is saved in a password manager. There's an interesting, internally in ThreatLocker, we've got 2 absolutely sacrosanct rules. One is that your ThreatLocker portal password, your password that you use to get into our portal, and your Office 365 password are memorized. They are never written down
even
anywhere.
In the password manager.
They are never stored in a password manager.
Interesting.
They are in your brain, and that is the only place that they are. And that's really important for those absolutely critical accounts. Same with my iCloud account password. Same with my email account password. I know what they are. Now, everything outside of that, I may well keep in a password manager. But as I said, it's one of the things that we feel very strongly about. And it's one of the things that we enforce heavily. No saving passwords, no writing them down, no password managers for those critical things. Make sure they're kept in your brain.
That's really interesting, right? Because a lot of the recommendations I hear is store everything in a password manager, and then you just remember one password for that password manager.
As the name of a password manager suggests.
As an example.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, which is fine, but we just go that one step further, which is these are the 2 most important things that we have. The most critical pieces of information we have are our portal password and our email or Office 365 password. And those things are never written down anywhere. So
passwords are often found on the dark web. Like you said, info stealers, all these kind of things is where your passwords end up. Troy Hunt's Have I Been Pwned website. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Companies are just getting breached all the time. Passwords are being leaked. So this is why you need 2FA.
Yeah, 100% is why you need 2FA. I mean, the as I said, the information, a lot of it is garbage, but a lot of it is actually valid. I had a really interesting case quite a few years ago. So it was back in my previous life when I worked for an MSP back home in Ireland. And it was a guy I knew. I used to do just little jobs. He had a Mac. I knew Mac. So he's like, okay, would you, fix this, do that? But he ran, and this isn't relative to 2FA specifically, but just to do with the kind of information that's out there. He called me one day in a panic and he said, look, I need to talk to you. I need to show you this email that I just got. And he got an email, basically spam or a scam, which was, look, we have hacked your machine. We know your password is X. Yeah. But the X was legitimate. It was a password that either he had recently used or he once used, but they used that little nugget of actual legitimate information. And it was the usual stuff. We've been looking through your camera. We've seen the websites you're going to. We know you're up to no good. We're going to tell your family about it. But the guy was literally in tears because of that nugget of believable information. So there is legitimate information out there in the midst of all the garbage, because a lot of it is garbage and a lot of it is regurgitated and it's a breach from 15 years ago. But there are more recent ones as well. And this is the thing. The more recent ones tend to have better data. They tend to have more information, things like social security numbers. We mentioned, or we discussed earlier, I've been in the US for a little over 2 years now. Within, I think, 3 months of me being here, my social security number was leaked. as part of a breach. There was a big breach of some data broker. And ironically, the week before, I'd been on TV talking about what to do if your information is leaked. I then get a notification, an email from my bank saying, hey, by the way, your social security number was in that breach. So I then had to go back and talk about, well, I'm now the person who is affected by this. But I mean, I think people should almost take the approach with this kind of information, things like social security numbers. Assume everybody knows it.
Exactly, yeah.
Assume everyone knows where you live. Yep. Assume everybody knows where you went to school, because it's not that difficult to find out. They just go onto Facebook, and most people have useful information like that publicly available for anybody to see. So assume the bad guys know almost as much about you as you do and work backwards from that. And that's just, it's a much better way of looking at things. Don't assume that there are things that you just know that they don't. Assume that they know everything. I had a really interesting one recently, and we, as part of our, I suppose, giving back to the community here in Orlando, we do events with the local PD. And recently I did one with a really nice police officer who goes into basically old people's homes, or senior living facilities, I think they call them here. And they basically tell people how to avoid getting scammed. But it was heartbreaking, because we give them all this advice and we tell them what to do and what not to do and what not to say, and just hang up and don't answer the number if you don't recognize it and all these things. But still afterwards, a couple of basically little old ladies came up to tell us the stories about how they'd been scammed. It's always that one nugget of information. You know, they pretend to be their kids. You know what I mean? Hi, Mom, I need that kind of stuff. I mean, it's heartbreaking. But again, there are things you can do to protect yourself.
It's interesting, in the UK, they had this case recently. The government's been warning about the fact that they phone old people, or elder people, however you want to say it, and they say they're going to do a lifestyle survey, and they get them to answer all kinds of personal information.
Yeah.
And then they clone their voice, and then they phone their banks and get direct debits set up by using voice authorization.
Yeah.
It's a wild west out there.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Okay, so the best...
Back to the subject. Sorry, I know we digressed. We digressed a lot there, David.
It's passwords. So, I mean, it's important, right? Because this is part of the issue. This is why we need MFA. So the best is SMS, right? That's the kind of response I like.
It is a MFA.
It's better than nothing, right?
It is better than nothing. It is undoubtedly better than nothing. It is not ideal. Problem with it is not that difficult for somebody to walk into a Verizon or an AT&T or a T-Mobile, pretend to be you and get your number. It's called SIM swapping. It's a really common approach. And a lot of the really high profile individual breaches or hacks have come from effectively SMS swapping or SIM swapping. So while it's better than nothing, it's far from ideal.
And what's really sad is a lot of banks still use that.
The mind boggles. Again, I'm here now, back home in Ireland. I'm in a financial institution, and the only option available is SMS. Plus, they don't do SMS to US numbers for some reason. So effectively, I can't access that financial institution because all they offer is SMS.
It's crazy. Okay, so SMS is better than nothing, but it's the worst of the solutions. What should I be looking at? Is it a Google Authenticator or something else?
Apps. Authenticator, they are effectively the best that you have available to you right now. Sorry, I lie. There are other options, because we're going to talk about things like hardware keys as well, biometric keys. So they're obviously a level above. But the likes of Authenticator apps.
For a normal person, right?
For a normal person, Authenticator apps, pretty much every website, every service, every email service, every social network, they will all offer two-factor authentication via Authenticator app. They are much better than nothing. They are far better than SMS. So they're absolutely something that everybody should implement. The really big point about this is a lot of people don't log into accounts for quite a long time. And it may have been that 3 or 4 years ago, whatever that service you used didn't offer didn't offer 2FA as an option. Now they do. So it's not a bad idea from time to time to log into old accounts, thing you haven't accessed in ages. Go in, see, do they offer two-factor authentication now? Can I do it with an Authenticator app? Great. Okay, now I'm going to do that. I'm going to use that. So it is a good idea to go back. They may not have done it before, but they probably do it now.
So do you have, like, if I'm an Apple user, as an example, could I just use Apple's 2FA or?
In theory, you could. So passwords in iCloud does have two-factor authentication capabilities built into it. Personally, I actually don't use it. So I'm Apple fanboy number one. I think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think their password manager is perfectly excellent. I think the fact that it integrates so well with everything. I mean, I use all Apple devices, so it makes sense for me to use that. But I don't use the 2FA built into the passwords app. And the reason I don't do that is because I want to have something somewhere else. I want to have it separated. I don't want to have all my eggs in the basket, so to speak.
Agreed. Yeah.
And that's a me thing. I'm not saying that's necessarily the right answer for everyone. Some people might think that a little bit of convenience to have it all built into one thing is better than having it separated across different accounts. But again, that's just me. But it is there. The facility is there to use their two-factor authentication.
So as an example, use iCloud for your passwords and then Google Authenticator. I just mentioned that because that's a very popular one because it's separate companies.
Yeah.
Not all your eggs in one basket.
Pretty much. And again, I don't only use two. I use 3 or 4 different ones. I mean, we use Duo, we use Microsoft Authenticator for certain things. So I kind of use different services, different authenticators. You could just do them all in one if you want as well, but I try and keep a separation between work and me, if that makes sense. So the work stuff goes over here, the me stuff goes over there, and it seems to work quite well.
And you mentioned hardware keys, so I like Yubikeys.
Yes,
is that a good
really
option?
Cool. Yubikeys are really cool. There was a stage when I wasn't a huge fan, and that was before they brought in biometrics. So the problem we had, and it's one of the reasons we actually don't support hardware keys or Yubikeys in our portal at the moment, is because the tendency is for people to leave them connected to a machine. And the problem is if you leave a hardware key that isn't biometrically initiated or operated connected to a machine, it's as good as having no 2FA at all, because an attacker gets access to your machine and they can just log into whatever the service might be. But since Yubikey have brought out their biometric stuff, so their thumbprint or fingerprint or whatever the case may be stuff, that is initiated by that touch, you've basically got the best of both worlds, because you've got your two-factor authentication, but you also have identity built into it as well. So you're saying, this is me, this is my fingerprint, unlock whatever this service is I'm trying to access. So that's probably the best that is available.
It's all about your threat model, right? Because like a little old lady it might be better that they write their passwords in a physical book, because how easy is it for a hacker to like go to their house, break in, versus just do it like over the internet, right?
Yeah.
So you just got to decide your threat model. Is that right?
That pretty much. I mean, everybody has to decide what works best for them. Everybody's got to decide what the potential threats are. So as you said, it's different for everyone.
Okay. So if I use Google Authenticator as an example, or Yubikeys, I've got 2FA, I'll never get hacked.
I'd never say never, David.
I'm winding you up.
Yeah, no, I know that. But even aside from the obvious, I would say never say never.
Yep.
Because nothing and nobody is 100% unhackable.
Yep.
It is a sad fact. You can make yourself really hard to hack. And to be honest, that is one of the things that ThreatLocker does, is we make environments really difficult or unfriendly and difficult and awkward for attackers to operate in. But never say never. So there are methods that you can get around two-factor authentication. So one of the most common ones is, they call it MFA bombing. So basically they get your password, they try to log in 1 million times, and they send 1 million requests through for an MFA. You get a pop-up on your phone. You might get 100 or 1,000 pop-ups on your phone, and you're going, no. Or they're thinking that somebody might be dumb enough to go, yes, all you have to do is once and it's done. So that's one danger or one strategy or tactic they use. But it is possible, even with MFA enabled and operating correctly, it is possible to pull cookies or tokens. And that's the problem. Once you've got that cookie or token, basically you can move that onto another machine and you can access that service that you were in on the original machine. Again, it's one of the things that we offer with our storage control, is we block access to cookies to everything except browsers, because very often it's a PowerShell script that runs. Yeah. It grabs a cookie or a token and it copies it off to whatever location it is. Now, if you can stop that, then you're a lot better, because the likelihood of a token getting stolen by a browser is probably a lot less than it is by another program. But it's still not perfect. There are things like, there's a thing called Evilginx, which is a really cool reverse proxy. So it basically sits in the middle between the user, a legitimate website. It's effectively the attacker will run a thing called Evilginx, which can basically grab those tokens. We did a demonstration not last year, but the year before. So it's kind of been a running joke or an ongoing thing with Zero Trust Worlds that we would always do a Wi-Fi Pineapple demonstration.
Yeah.
And I had assistance by a guy called Steve, English guy called Steve, who is an absolute genius at this stuff. He's like the Jacoby of Wi-Fi Pineapples and Evilginxes. So between us, we managed to get Wi-Fi Pineapple, Evilginx, portal set up, Office 365, and I managed to do what remains the one single successful Wi-Fi Pineapple demonstration that we've done at the Zero Trust World, because all of the other ones went up in flames. They all completely, like it was a running gag, to be perfectly honest. And I think Danny used to do it just to have an opportunity to laugh at it failing again. I was previously known as Chief Pineapple Officer because of both my successful and failed Wi-Fi Pineapple attempts. But anyway, one of the ones that we did was using an Evilginx, and it was terrifying seeing how easy it was. It's literally just you get redirected to a page that looks something like, the page looks identical. The URL is probably a little bit different, but not noticeably so. And if you weren't really paying attention to that URL, you'll see an Office 365 login page. You'll put in your username, you'll put in your password, you'll do your MFA. You'll get in to Office 365, not knowing that in between this reverse proxy is sitting there and it's grabbed your token and it can be used somewhere else. So while MFA is good, it is not perfect. And other solutions to protect yourself exist or will exist tomorrow.
Yes, you got to tell us about that, right? Because, but before we talk about the solution, I wanted to just talk a bit more about the cookie stealing or the session token stealing. So in other words, if I log into, say, ThreatLocker's website, I get a cookie or a token, if you like, on my computer. That is my proof that I am who I say I am.
For all intents and purposes.
After I've done like password and 2FA, everything.
Correct.
So if you manage to steal that, you can log in as me.
I don't even have to log in as you. All I need to do is go to the ThreatLocker website. I have the cookie and I can literally continue on from where you were.
It's scary, right?
We've done it in demonstrations. It's so easy. You would be amazed at how simple it is. And it pretty much works in our testing anyway, pretty much for any website. So we've done it for Git. We've done it for obviously various different portals. We've done it for Office 365. It's unbelievably easy. And very often it is literally just a PowerShell command saying, take a file from here, pop it over there, and you've access.
So Rob, you've kind of teased that you guys have a solution. Can you give us a bit more information?
Sure. So the new product that we're introducing at Zero Trust World this year is kind of twofold. It's a Zero Trust network access and a Zero Trust cloud access. In the context of what we're talking about here, it's more about the Zero Trust cloud access part. A little bit of background. So we introduced a product last year called Cloud Control.
Yeah.
And Cloud Control was an incredibly clever concept. It wasn't my idea, I stress. But it was a really clever idea, which was that we have agents running on millions of machines. We have iPhone apps, which are basically agents running on iPhones. So we know all of the IP addresses that our users are connecting from. What we were doing was we were gathering all those IP addresses and we were basically uploading them to Office 365. And we're using to a named location. And we're using what's called conditional access. So Office 365 has a really powerful tool built into it, which is called conditional access.
Yeah.
So you can say, don't allow these IP addresses to connect, or do allow these IP addresses to connect, or don't allow this country to connect, or don't allow all of these countries to connect. But the problem with Microsoft's implementation of it is that it's quite broad, because generally what will happen is, say I'm a company in the US, I might create a conditional access policy, and it would look like typically is allow all US IP addresses. That's a lot of IP addresses. It's billions of IP addresses potentially. And all it takes for an attacker to get around that conditional access is to connect to a machine in the US, and off they go. So limiting it to countries, whilst better than nothing, is still not ideal. So our idea was to block by default, much like we do with application control, permit by exception, but the exception being the IP addresses that we gathered from phones, devices, laptops, Macs, whatever the case may be. Now, as I said, it was a brilliant idea. We implemented our side of the equation, what I thought was really well, which is within a minute, we'd have the IP address gathered and we'd have it uploaded to Microsoft. The problem emerged that Microsoft took their sweet ass time in terms of updating those conditional access policies with the new IP addresses, with the new information we've given them. So what we found was it might take a couple of minutes, it might take up to 15 minutes. Now, if you're going from your office to your car to your house, 15 minutes, you've probably changed IP addresses 3 or 4 times. And it just meant that it was more friction than your average user would be prepared to countenance. And to be honest, it was more friction than I would have been prepared to endure, waiting for potentially up to 15 minutes to be able to access my Teams or my Office 365. So that was last year. This year, we've taken a new approach to it, which is effectively routing all traffic from my phone through ThreatLocker's infrastructure, which means that you lock down your conditional access to ThreatLocker's infrastructure through our brokers, basically. So we don't need to know about every single IP address that's connecting. We just need to know that those things can connect to our infrastructure, and then you allow our infrastructure to speak to your Office 365. So it's a different way of solving the same problem, but it's a much more efficient and much more effective and much less likely for Microsoft to muck up by taking their sweet ass time, because it doesn't need to be that dynamic.
So it's like a proxy through ThreatLocker.
For all intents and purposes.
You are doing the authentication of the IP addresses.
Correct.
Making
We're
sure
also, and the other thing is we are bringing identity into it as well. Because I have the app on my phone now, I can't connect to the VPN without Face ID. So if I try and do it with your face, it's going to say you can't connect. So it's both using identity and my device, which is, again, another layer of protection. But once it's identified that I am who I say I am, it will then allow me to connect, from where I'll be able to go into my Outlook, my Teams. But the interesting thing is, and we were kind of limited last year insofar as we said, look, we'll focus this on Office 365 for now. Then we want to move it to G Suite. We want to move it to Git. We want to move it to all sorts of other services, things like Atlassian and stuff like that. But the problem is we had such issues and such difficulty with Office 365, which, to be honest, is the thing that most organizations use. There was little point in us trying to apply the same principles to Git and everything else. With this, pretty much every service that you choose to mention, or any mature service, will allow you to restrict access by IP address or IP address range. So you're blocking by default, you're allowing just these IP addresses or these ranges to connect. And it can be applied, as I said, not only to Office 365, but also G Suite and Git and all of the other things that people want to keep their data safe on. Back to our original question, which is, in that circumstance, in that situation, even if somebody did manage to steal my cookie, even if they knew my password, even if they had my phone in their hand to do a 2FA or approve a 2FA request, they still won't be able to access, because they're not going to be on a trusted IP address range.
Office 365, you said, so just help me because I'm a bit slow, that's set up to allow ThreatLocker to talk to it, and then my IP address goes through ThreatLocker proxied. So if you steal my cookie,
doesn't matter.
You can't get access because ThreatLocker is blocking you.
Not ThreatLocker, it's actually Office 365. So it's
through you.
Correct. It's Office 365. Conditional access is set to block access to everything.
Oh,
everything except, in this case, ThreatLocker's IP addresses. So it's deny by default, permit by exception. But because you're connecting through, or I'm connecting through ThreatLocker's IP addresses, it means Office 365 will let me in, or rather the other way around, because you're connecting through ThreatLocker's IP addresses, Office 365 will let you in. Because I'm not, even though I've got your cookie, it won't let me access it.
So Rob, this is great to hear. It's a cat and mouse game, right? Because the attackers are doing more and more clever things. So what else have you guys got up your sleeves?
So the other big issue that a lot of organizations face today is compromise through perimeter devices. So very often it's compromised VPN credentials. Now, it goes back to what we were speaking about earlier on, with people reusing passwords, not having MFA on accounts. And I've spoken to customers who have had experience in dealing with organizations who've had exactly that. So interestingly, one of our most valued advisory board members, they deal specifically with IOR. So they're going into incidents, into environments that have been compromised, and they can basically see what's happened or retrace the steps. And they mentioned to me there was a couple of instances recently where the attackers had never had a foothold in the network.
Yeah.
They'd never actually got access to a machine inside the network because they didn't need to.
Yeah.
They had, in one instance, got onto a VPN using compromised VPN credentials. So somebody basically, their password getting out there and it getting reused. And another case through a vulnerability in a firewall.
Yeah, it's happened a lot recently.
Pretty much every day of the week that ends in Y, there seems to be a new exploitable or exploited vulnerability in a firewall. So it happens so often. The problem is that basically most of these vulnerabilities that are being exploited are because of ports that are open to the internet. Because fundamentally, every port that is open to the internet increases the attack surface of your environment. If you never have any ports open to the internet, if you don't have management ports open, you don't have RDP ports open, HTTP ports, any port open to the internet, your machine's effectively invisible to the outside world. So there's nothing to hack. There's nothing to get into. But the problem is organizations need to give secure access to resources inside the network. And that's where Zero Trust Network Access comes into it, which is I got my device, it has a ThreatLocker agent on it. I got my server, it's got a ThreatLocker agent on it. I don't want to open a port to the internet to allow that connect to that. So what we do instead is, again, connect via ThreatLocker's infrastructure. So it's Zero Trust Network Access, but again, it's delivered through the same agent that we deliver everything else that we do through. It's managed through the same portal. It's the same everything. It's the same platform. It's the same tool that people are already used to, but you just get this additional capability, which is, I want to give access to this for all of these devices out here. How do I do it securely?
I don't need to have a VPN device or a firewall.
Absolutely not.
It's just going through ThreatLocker.
It's one of the most common misconceptions is a VPN makes me safe.
Because if only.
And this is the whole point. I mean, there are benefits to it because in a lot of cases your traffic is encrypted and that's all very well and good, but it still necessitates a port to be open to the internet. And as I said, every port, much the same way as every piece of software that you allow to run increases your attack surface, every port that you open to the internet increases your attack surface as well. It's actually one of my favorite, I'm not going to call it a game, but it's one of my favorite little exercises that I'll do, which is to go on to Shodan from time to time. And one of the cool things you can do with Shodan is you can search for a port in a city. So you can say port 3389, city, Orlando. I did it recently and there's something like 800 or 900 separate devices in the Orlando area with
crazy.
3389 exposed to the internet. In a lot of cases, the screenshots, which is really helpful. In a lot of cases, it's screenshots with a username.
Exactly.
So they don't even need to guess the username. All they need to do is guess the password. So that's 800-900 organizations that are just a brute force attack away from being the next victim of a ransomware attack. So that's why we are doing this. You don't have to open RDP to the internet. You don't have to open a VPN to the internet. You don't have to open anything to the internet. You can be effectively invisible to the outside world so they can run all the port scans they want on your environment. Nothing is going to show up. And that is the beauty of this approach.
Rob, I have to play devil's advocate here. I am putting my trust in you guys. Is that a risk?
Is that a risk? Well, it's a difficult, because Zero Trust is pretty much the foundation of everything that we do. We are very much Zero Trust advocates. So you could say that placing your trust in anyone is unwise. The fact of the matter is, if you place your trust in no one, you will never run any software. You will never get anything done. You will not run a business. So the fact of the matter is you have to place a degree of trust. And again, that's why Zero Trust is somewhat of a misnomer. I'm not going to say it's badly named, but you have to trust someone to some extent, to some degree.
Exactly. I mean, you can't do anything in life with some type of trust.
You would never leave the house.
Exactly.
You would never go on the internet. You would never turn a computer on. I mean, you're trusting Microsoft every time, or Apple, or whoever the case may be, every time you turn a computer on. So you're just extending that slightly to, in this case, ourselves.
I will say this though, I would rather trust you guys than some random hardware device or something that's out there.
Or listen, there's lots of VPN providers out there as well. I mean, I use some of them myself. We spoke about sport. It's a really useful way to be able to watch sports in places that you're not supposed to watch sports. So look, some of these services are useful. Some of them are good. Some of them are secure. Some of them are less so. The fact of the matter is we've got nearly 9 years of pedigree in this space. We've got 60,000 organizations that basically depend on us for their cybersecurity. And that number is obviously growing daily. You've got 2,000 people, over 2,000 people walking around this event right now, the majority of whom are customers of ThreatLocker. They ultimately place their trust in us that our solution is going to keep them safe. It's one of the most common pieces of feedback that I get. And it's amazing how often it is said to me, and it's that you guys help me sleep at night. Because look, most of these people are IT guys. You know what I mean? They're the ones who are responsible for keeping businesses safe. And it is the biggest compliment that somebody can give me is to say, what I do and what we do as a company helps them sleep at night. Because it means not only are we changing their business, not only are we improving their business, we're also changing their lives for the better. And there is no greater compliment than that. So I suppose to answer your question directly, you do have to, despite the name Zero Trust, you do have to place some trust in somebody. Do I not look, is this not the beard of a trustworthy man?
I love it. So Rob, I got to ask you this as well, playing devil's advocate. I won't mention names, but as we said, a lot of firewalls have been hacked, breached yes. a lot. Like you said, every day that ends in a Y. So I got to flip the question to you. Have ThreatLocker been hacked or breached?
No.
And how many years is that? I don't want to jinx it.
Well, I am touching wood already. 2017. Look, the reality is nobody is unbreachable. Nobody is unhackable. And anybody who claims to be, but our track record would suggest that. And it's because we use our own tools. We use our own tools internally within our organization. So our 700 staff all have devices running ThreatLocker. One of the saddest days of my life was the first day I worked for ThreatLocker. I was on a Zoom call with Danny, and at home in Ireland, it was during COVID, a little over 5 years ago. I had the most beautiful, I can still picture it now, but the most beautiful 27-inch iMac Pro, a beast of a computer, completely overkill for what I needed it for. But I was so proud of this iMac Pro. I loved it. And the first day I started working for ThreatLocker, Danny said to me, you can't use that for work. I'm going to get you a Windows machine. And I was like, why? I can run VMs. It's got many Xeon cores. He said, doesn't matter. It's still running Mac OS. We don't have a Mac OS agent. So therefore you could have, clipboard stealers. You could have info stealers. You could have anything on your machine that I don't know about. So I'm not going to let you use that for work. So it was one of the saddest days of my life. One of the happiest days of my life was a couple of years later when we had a fully functioning Mac agent that was effectively the same as a Windows agent. And I could now use a Mac again. So I'm back to the point where I can with work. And again, I can't use it for all things because I have to do demos that involve VMs and Windows and so on. But where I can use a Mac safely, knowing ThreatLocker is running it and keeping me safe.
Rob, I just want to say thank you for sponsoring this video and, bringing me back to ZTW. It's great to talk to you and great to see what's happening.
It's been a pleasure to have you, David, and thank you for coming.